The memory often returns to me in the deep hours of the night, not as a sharp, clear picture, but as a collection of sensations. The profound chill of the mountain air, the scent of damp pine and loam, and a sound that was unlike anything I had ever heard in all my years roaming these woods. It was a sound that began this strangest and most sacred night of my life, a night Ivy kept locked away in my heart for decades. A story I share now, not for spectacle, but for the quiet truth it holds. It was the autumn of 1978. I was a younger man then, though my knees already complained about becoming cold. My wife, Eleanor, had passed 2 years prior, and the silence of our empty house had become a weight I could scarcely bear. To find solace, I'd often take my old pickup truck up into the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, not to hunt, but simply to listen to the world breathe. On this particular evening, a thick fog had rolled in with the sunset, swallowing the logging roads whole. I decided, perhaps foolishly, to take a shortcut on a disused trail I remembered from my youth. The truck's tires, bald as billiard balls, lost their purchase on the muddy incline, and I found myself well and truly stuck, miles from the nearest main road with a dead radio, resigned to a long, cold wait for morning. I gathered my wool blanket and thermos from the cab, and decided to walk a short way to a rocky outcrop I knew offered a view, hoping to see a distant light. That's when I heard it. It wasn't the hoot of an owl or the cry of a coyote. It was a soft, whimpering sound, a melody of pure distress that cut through the mist. It sounded so small. My first thought was a bear cub, but the pitch was wrong. Driven by a grandfather's instinct I hadn't felt in years, I followed the sound, my flashlight beam bouncing weakly in the oppressive fog. I found the source in a shallow hollow between the roots of a massive Sitka spruce, and there, my world tilted on its axis. It was a creature, perhaps 3 feet tall, covered in a fine, dark, reddish-brown fur that was matted with wet leaves and mud. It was hunched over, its broad shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. It had the general shape of a human child, but the proportions were different. Longer arms, powerfully built for its size. As I took a half-step closer, a twig snapped under my boot. The creature flinched and looked up. Any fear I might have felt evaporated in an instant. Looking into its face, I did not see a monster. I saw a child, a lost, terrified, and utterly vulnerable child. Its eyes, a startling light amber, were wide with fear and glistening with tears. They held an intelligence, a deep and poignant sadness that erased all myth and legend from my mind. This was no Bigfoot. This was a little one, alone in the vast, cold dark. We stared at each other for a long moment, the air humming with tension. Slowly, so slowly, I knelt down, placing my flashlight on the ground to dim its glare. I spoke in the same low, gentle tone I used to use when my own daughter had a nightmare. "There now," I murmured. "It's all right. You're not alone." I didn't know if it understood words, but I hoped it understood the tone. I shrugged off my wool blanket, holding it out like an offering before carefully draping it over the small, shivering shoulders. It flinched at first, then seemed to melt into the warmth, pulling the rough material tight around itself. For what felt like hours, we sat there in that quiet bubble of mist and moonlight. "Primera ta, el ked, tu, italiano." I told it about Eleanor, about the constellations hidden behind the clouds, about the silly names I had for the different trees in the forest. It would occasionally make a soft, guttural sound, not a growl, but more like a curious rumble, and I would answer as if we were having a real conversation. The fear in its eyes had been replaced by a weary, watchful calm. Once, it reached out a hand-long fingers tipped with carefully kept, not claw-like, nails and gently touched the sleeve of my jacket, as if confirming I was real. The spell was broken by a sound that rolled through the forest from a great distance. It was a low, resonant call, a deep whoop that vibrated in my chest. It was a sound of profound worry, of a parent calling for its child. The little one's head snapped up, its eyes wide. It answered with a high-pitched, chattering cry that was full of relief. The call came again, closer this time, from the ridge above us. It was answered by another, from a different direction. They were coming. A primal caution, a respect for the boundary I was crossing, told me it was time to go. I stood up slowly. The little creature stood with me, still clutching the blanket around its shoulders. It looked at me one last time, and in those ancient, knowing eyes, I saw something I can only describe as gratitude. Then it turned and scampered up the slope with an effortless, fluid grace, disappearing into the dark timber. I stood, frozen, listening to the sounds of its return, a series of joyful chirps and rumbles meeting the deep, soothing tones of its parents. Then, silence. The forest felt whole again. The emptiness was gone. I made my way back to my truck in a daze, the cold no longer biting. By first light, a park ranger found me. He joked about city folk getting lost in the woods, and I just smiled and nodded, accepting the ribbing. I never told him. I never told anyone. Some truths are too fragile for the harsh light of day. And the skepticism of the modern world, they are gifts meant to be carried quietly. That night, I didn't meet a monster from a tabloid. I shared a moment of profound connection with a lost child from a world that walks beside our own, hidden in the shadows just beyond our sight. It was a reminder that in the deepest wilderness and in the deepest solitude, we can find not just fear, but the most unexpected and healing kind of kinship. And on lonely nights, even now, I sometimes look out my window at the dark line of the forest and hope that the little one, now surely grown, is safe and warm with its own.